Welcome to my show, simply entitled Women Influencers.
I'm Veronica Malolos, CCIM, founder and CEO of Capstack Commercial, a commercial real estate company serving the greater Orlando area. Today's guest is entrepreneur Edie Weintraub, a talented broker who specializes in placemaking, combining culinary concepts and culture to curate fabulous food halls. Please don't forget to hit that thumbs up button and subscribe below. I welcome your comments and please share with someone who can benefit from this podcast. Hi, Edie. It's so good to see you this afternoon, all the way from Atlanta.
Yeah, so good to see you too. Thank you for having me.
Oh, yeah, this is wonderful. I know you're in between appointments, so thank you. You're beautiful Tesla, and I'm so happy to have you here today. Well, let's get started if you don't mind. I am so curious as to your story, how you grew up in your environment and how you got to where you are today. So please tell us, Edie.
Absolutely. I was fascinated with science as a kid. I loved school, and I was a very good student, even in elementary school. My mom tells me I was reading at a second grade level in kindergarten, and I'm sure she was just a proud mama and she was bragging. But loved school, loved science, and always thought I wanted to do something in the arena of science. So I worked for my dentist all throughout high school. Made a pretty good career out of that and thought, well, I'm going to combine the science and dentistry and my love of biology and go into dental school. So I was studying biology, but I recall afterwards, I would make notes in the charts and I would say, oh, this patient's daughter's getting married. Next time she comes in, make sure to ask her about how her daughter's wedding was. And so I was really weaving hospitality into the work I was doing as a dental assistant. I was very curious about people. And when I graduated with my degree in biology, I realized, I wouldn't be able to talk to people as a dentist because by the time I get into the room, they have to have their mouths open and they're not communicating with me. And I just didn't feel like this was the right fit. While I was working as a dental assistant through high school and through college, I also got started in hospitality. I worked in nightclubs in college because I thought it was stupid for me to pay to go and listen to music and dance when I should be paid to promote. So I was a nightclub promoter in Atlanta, and this was awesome. It was in the late 90s, early 2000s. And at the same time, in addition to being a nightclub promoter, I also started working in restaurants. So I was a host, I was a server, I was a food runner. And I think what I really loved about that is I was able to fuse my love of hospitality and people. And I'm one of those crazy people that likes a blank slate every day because every day is a new day. And whatever I may have needed to change from yesterday, I can do that tomorrow. And so I was able to weave my love of hospitality and people into real estate. So ultimately I decided I was not going to go to dental school. And my father had for years encouraged me to get my real estate license. He had been in real estate on the land side of assembling properties, selling off to residential developers, doing developments himself. And he said, I really feel like this would be good for you. You like people. And I said, yeah, okay. So I got my real estate license and I was doing residential for a little while, but the emotional aspect of residential was just not my jam. And I missed that energy of hospitality. So I thought, let me go seek out office, industrial, retail. Let me feel what that fit is for me. And I think I leaned heavily into retail because I just felt like I could bring my creativity to the table that I couldn't do that in industrial and office. So there's a company in Atlanta that basically I stalked for a year and a half. And I called about 5 people every single month. And finally, 18 months in, they said, okay, Edie, we get it. You are not going to give up. You don't listen to the word no. We need to take you on our team. And so I started with them. And I learned the world of retail through their eyes and through a mentor there. And at first I was working with national brands, Party City, Famous Footwear, great companies to represent. But I would get a store open and I'd look around and I'd say, where is everybody? And so even then in the mid 2000s, I just felt like retail was kind of quiet. And I really wanted to embrace the energy that I experienced in nightclubs and restaurants. So I started reaching out to my contacts in those worlds. And they said, oh, yeah, real estate, restaurant operations. Yeah, we should definitely work with you. So I was able to fuse those two together. And I did 11 years at that first company. And then I decided I wanted to see what, a big global company was all about. So I jumped ship, I went to a big global company. And while it was enlightening to learn from folks in other asset classes, it really wasn't creative enough for me. The majority of my clients are local and regional and emerging. And I really love educating them that our services exist to help them grow. And so it was during the pandemic in early 21 that I decided I think I should go out on my own and open my own company. And it was fun to think through the process of what the company name would be. I definitely did not want it named after me. I feel like the majority of other firms across the world are named after people. And I said, I want this to be something that hopefully, people can grow even if I'm not here. And so the name of the company is Terra Alma, and that's Terra. It's Italian for dirt, grounded. Alma is Spanish for soul. And so it's kind of a nice nod to encourage the team to always be looking for a means to grow, to learn, to travel. But at the same time, it's the massive filter by which we pass every opportunity and client that we work with through. If we don't feel like we can put a piece of our soul into working with this client or this property, this developer, this tenant, this restaurant operator, we say no. We have a very abundant mindset. And so if it just doesn't feel like a fit, then we are happy to move on.
Wow, that's pretty amazing, Edie. I think what's really struck me is about your story is the fact that you were able to infuse your creativity to your practice. And I know that we actually had met a couple of times, but the last time that we were together was in a conference in Santa Monica. And that's when I actually realized that you are a curator of spaces, right? Of culture, of that's why you have these food halls that you're so successful with. So I absolutely love it. We'll talk about that just a little bit more later on. But tell me about a challenge that you overcame that is worth talking about or could be inspirational to our audience.
Yeah. There was a point in time at one of my previous firms that I felt like I was doing a lot of work in business development. And I kind of looked around and I thought, I really love business development. I think I'm really good at it. And I pitched the company for a role in that arena. And I think that one of the challenges that I faced is that my approach is very unique, right? I just walk into a restaurant, I look around, I see if the servers are picking up after themselves or picking up after their guests. I see if they're happy. I talk to the servers. I talk to the bartenders. I do a really deep, secret shopping dive on any retailers or restaurants that we work with. And if I don't see that the team is well cared for by the owners of that business, then I don't even bother talking to them, because I know if the team that is being trained by the owners is not in good spirits, then I look to move on and I'll work with somebody else that I know, because that love of the owners passes through to the servers, to the bartenders, to the people who are caring for you. And then the people and the guests of the restaurant are well cared for. So I secret shop all the restaurants. And so I love business development. And I feel like I couldn't enter that role in a previous firm because someone else was very steadfast in that position, even though I felt like they weren't truly active in that role. So I said, you know what? That's okay. I'm just going to open my own shop and, be very, very strong in the niche of educating the local consumer that our services exist and then seeing them grow and thrive.
And how difficult was that as a challenge? I mean, you just decided that you were going to open your own business, but how did you
Oof.
overcome that? The fear, is it the fear that was challenging? Was it just that whole logistical timing wise of transition? What exactly was it that was challenging to you?
Yeah, I mean, anytime you pick up and leave a firm, you have about 2 years to pick up the pipeline that you have built, because it's almost like starting over. So now I've done that twice. So it kind of sets you back, right? It's very difficult to kind of start on over, but then also start on your own. It's very lonely as an entrepreneur. And if I have to admit, I look in the mirror every day and I'm like, oh my gosh, it's still here. Everything's still here. It's very scary starting from scratch. And, yes, you're learning from others and have amazing cheerleaders out in the world. And I am so blessed to have 4 amazing women who've decided to take the leap and join the company and work with us. And I think we have a lot of fun. I hope that comes through on our socials. But I think, the challenge was taking the leap and going out on my own and kind of proving to others that I didn't need their support. Because I think a lot of people get stuck. They get very comfortable and they don't like changing. And for me, that's one thing that I always teach my kids. If there's only one thing you can count on is that things will change. So you have to be nimble. You have to be open to new ideas. You have to be receptive to trying new things.
Yeah, absolutely. And funny enough, as an entrepreneur, I was thinking those same thoughts this morning. And my bank account is very healthy right now, but I can't help but think, oh my goodness, I can't believe I'm still here. And how long will this last? But there's this fire on my butt that's saying, you got to keep going. Otherwise, if you're lackadaisical, you could easily just disappear very quickly. So thank you for that. I wanted to ask you about
Yeah.
influence.
Yeah.
You have made an impact on something or an outcome that you're most proud of, and I'd love for you to talk about that.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like there's so many things I'm really proud of. I'm going to talk probably about 2 things specifically. So I brought a food hall operator from New York to Atlanta. We looked at about 20 sites. We ultimately landed on a site in West Midtown. And at the time, unfortunately, the operator had a ill father. And so he was going back and forth to New York. He had another project in Minneapolis he was working on. And I said, you know what, I've got this. Let me just interview the vendors. I'll bring you in for the tasting. You can meet them. And I was curating this in June of 2021. June of 2020.
Wow.
June of 2020. Not the best time to get, food vendors to come out and look at spaces. And so, to go through that process and to get to April of 21, when we opened at about 80% capacity, we opened with 3 different times for media. Just again, it was just still in the pandemic and we wanted to be respectful of people. So we had 3 rounds of media and people coming in as like a tasting day, like a soft opening. And for me, I've lived there basically for a year. And so to see the vendors, and some of which were, first time operators, maybe they had a food truck, maybe they had a catering business, to see them open and to see people in a space that I've basically lived in for a year that was quiet and just me walking through with the construction team, I was a proud mama. The other part is that when I opened Terra Alma, it was just me for about 2 months. And I said, I'm lonely. I really want to teach others that this field exists, because when you get your real estate license, they don't really teach you about all the different types of commercial. They don't teach you about industrial and office and retail and restaurant. You really just learn about residential. So opened my firm and I immediately in 2 months, I said, I can't do this by myself. I really want to build a team. And I think I went through about 30 interviews and I met this woman on LinkedIn and she was very soft spoken. She was in the world of banking for the last 5 years, very sharp, very intelligent. And I said, well, why don't you come with me and do a working day? So she did. I spent the majority of the day at the food hall finishing up a couple of deals. Then we also toured another space to look at another food hall. And in retrospect, now 4 years later, she tells me, the second I saw that you were interested in food, people, and real estate, I know that we were a good match. What I'm most proud of for her is that she is 30 years old and she has just been nominated to 40 Under 40 in the Atlanta Business Chronicle. So I'm like, oh, well, you should be nominated for the next 10 years for this. So her level of involvement in her community, her church, and her passion to see her clients successful is just, it's so inspiring to see her growth and then be able to do this for other women in the industry.
Isn't that amazing how we put ourselves out there and we don't even know, what kind of impact we're going to have. And then you see these operators that you've put in that food hall in a very, very challenging time. that have thrived, and also, of course, the young woman who ended up on your team is now an award-winning professional, and I just totally appreciate what you just shared right there. So thank you for that, Edie. I wanted to ask you if there was one piece of advice that you could give to our audience today, what would that be?
Of course, it's one of my favorite sayings. We were born with 2 ears and one mouth. So that should teach you that we should listen much more than we speak. I feel like that's one of my greatest attributes is that when we have our clients in the car and we're touring them around different markets, I'm always very curious about them. And I think the more that you're an active listener, just like we're doing here in this podcast, you are gracious enough to open up your podcast and let me share my stories with your audience. If we listen more than we speak, then we'll absorb and learn so much more about the individuals that we are around.
Absolutely. And I agree. I couldn't agree with you more. I wanted to kind of pass on the mic to you at this point and have you ask me a question.
Yeah. So we have had the pleasure of running into each other a couple of times, one at Beth Azor's conference in March, and then most recently at Reconvene on the West Coast. So I'm curious to hear maybe a couple of highlights from you about your experience in that conference and what learnings you took home.
Yes, absolutely. And for the sake of our audience, the conference called Reconvene was held in Santa Monica this year, and it was put together by actually a Twitter influencer whose name is Moses Keegan. And it is really more for operators. In other words, people who have invested in commercial real estate. And so you and I both, Edie, we got a chance to meet a lot of these people. And I wasn't shocked, but there was probably about 95% men and 5% women, right? And what I took from that was that there are women in our industry like Beth Azor, who's made such an impact on, for instance, that industry itself, because my understanding is that last year there was probably maybe 3 women that attended this conference. Yeah, I don't know if you even knew that because I was asking around. And so I think we were probably about maybe close to 10 or a dozen women. And that to me was eye opening, number one. But number two, listening to the operators who started from scratch really inspired me a lot. There was a speaker, a keynote speaker, who spoke about having a 9 to 5 job and an executive job and figured out that if he just started buying single family homes, and he started with 3, I believe, and ended up with 5,400 units, I mean, in a span of less than 10 years. My takeaway would be if they can do it, we can do it too. Now, most especially for women who are starting to engage in industries that are not typically attended by women, I think it's so important. You and I, and the rest of the women, and hopefully more women on this podcast who are listening, would really just open their minds to entering an industry that perhaps women are not so who are not typically attending, because you just don't know where that would take you. I think that that's the biggest takeaway from me, and of course, so many other sort of golden nuggets that I got just in furthering my business. And again, it's not for everyone. Number one, it's pretty limiting because of the cost of it, right? Because it's one of those expensive conferences. However, if there's a will, there's a way, right? And so I was really just in awe. And guess what? I'm going again next year. I'm not sure if you are, but certainly want to reconnect with all these people. And as a matter of fact, I have just connected with a lot of them on LinkedIn, which is really fantastic. So LinkedIn is pretty great. Well, I want to thank you for being here today. And I know you also have a podcast. And so, Edie, tell us a little bit about your podcast, what it's about, how we can find you, and all that good stuff.
Absolutely. So my podcast is called Hustle and Heart, Conversations with Culture Creators. We spend a lot of time fostering the voices and elevating the voices of artists, musicians, mental health advocates, folks who are doing cool things in cool spaces, because I love placemaking and creating, collisions where new ideas can come together and be formed. So for me, just showcasing those artists, musicians, farmers, restaurateurs, places who are providing a means for people to gather and offer conversation. For us, you can find my team and I at terraalma.com. And then a lot of my stuff and my podcasts are on edieeverywhere.com. We laugh because I was looking for a moniker that would define who I am and what I do. And I thought the alliteration on Edie Everywhere was just perfect. So all of my social media handles are Edie Everywhere.
Oh, I love that. I love that so much. And of course, it's easy to find you on LinkedIn, and
Yes.
all the information will be there as well. Well, I just want to thank you. I know you're, again, in between meetings and you're still in your car, and you just don't know how much I appreciate this time I have with you, Edie. So thank you. Be safe and always successful.
Thank you as well. I appreciate your time.
Take care.